Today's topic is the Model 1910 canteen used by the U.S. military. From the Civil War almost to World War I, U.S. soldiers carried round canteens that maybe looked like two frisbees glued together and stuffed into a round pillowcase. In 1909, an Army committee decided to test out a different style, something that would become known as the Model 1910 canteen. The earliest one I have here was made in 1918. The latest I have is 1966, but the Model 1910 continued to be made into the 1990s, and over the decades going from steel to aluminum to plastic. Model numbers actually evolved a little bit, but they pretty much all look like the Model 1910, and some parts were even interchangeable. This particular one was made by the John W. Brown Manufacturing Company, and again it is 1918 as date of manufacture, but the cover that it came in is 1934, made at the Jefferson Quartermaster Depot in Indiana. This looked quite different when it was first issued. On the side are remnants of stitches that held leather straps on. The straps would have gone all the way around and come up the side and tied or were mounted up here at the top. This was the mounted canteen cover. Later, I think World War II, these were favored by the airborne people jumping out of airplanes. And again, this one really predates World War II, 1934. Has the hook to hold it onto the belt. One interesting thing about this is you may have noticed the writing on the front. And this mounted canteen cover, produced at the Army Quartermaster Depot, ended its government service as part of the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, in pre-World War II. And the guy's name on here is Johnny Moore, La Mirada, California. And I was actually able to find information about him online, verifying that he was, in fact, in the Conservation Corps. Notice over here something that's quite common on old war surplus, a price tag written with a grease pencil. They used to do this thing, I know, in the 50s and 60s at the surplus stores, and you'd see pristine canteen covers, and somebody come by with a pen whose marks you would never, ever get off there, and they put the label on it. And there's also one in the back for $1.95. So maybe it got marked down to 49 cents for the final sale. Inside this, you have a blanket wool insulation. And you can tell it's wool. There's a little nip there from a moth or silverfish or something of the sort. And this is looks like the Army blanket wool, and the later ones have a thicker, messier sort of felt. This next canteen is 24 years newer, dated 1942, and made by the same company that had the patent for seamless aluminum canteens way back in 1910. That's the AGM company, short for Aluminum Goods Manufacturing Company. As you can see, again, 24 years difference in these. But there's little, if any, difference. They have the same domed metal caps, the ring around the neck, the chain, the shape. This 1942 canteen is in a 1949 cover, which is not a common date for U.S. field gear. It was made by Baker Lockwood, a Kansas City company that did business as Western Awning. This is certainly not as beat up as the CCC cover, but it has some signs of maybe actual field use. Next to the U.S., you can see that. Somebody has taken a needle and thread and just crisscrossed that 100 times or more, almost like reweaving. They did the same thing up here. On the back of this, the hook is rusty. That did a lot of damage to the surrounding fabric. They used at some points brass hooks, but brass was a strategic material, so they tried the cheap steel for a while. That didn't work very well. Let's open this one up and take a look at the insulation inside. This is not like the blanket wool. This is really felt. Doesn't look as nice as the blanket wool either. And, oh, look, inside here is the canteen cup. I've had one sitting over here just for this very reason. These things are a bear to get out and get back in. It's really tight on there. I can squeeze that and it just doesn't want to move. So rather than remove all of those and put them back in, I just decided I would show you a canteen cup. I don't know if this is World War II or not. Yeah, it says like 1945. And you can heat these things over the flame. The handle folds up to go inside the cover. They make nice pencil holders in your garage. Okay, this looks different. This canteen and the cover were made especially for the Marines. These flaps are quite different. Collectors call these cross-flap covers. They came along about 1942-43, and then in 1943 they decided to put a hole in the bottom of the cover so it could be used as a funnel. Apparently a lot of water was being wasted in the field trying to fill up canteens. Ignore for a moment the canteen. That's actually fairly snug there. I guess when it gets wet and the fabric expands a little bit, it could be tighter. See if we can see inside. Oh, there we go. We've been looking mostly at aluminum canteens. This one is black porcelain enamel. And there's also a less common blue enamel version canteen, which seems to have been made for the Army. There's a stamp on the bottom of this, US and SM Co., which is Singer Manufacturing Company, dated 1942. Aluminum and stainless steel canteens used metals that were needed in aircraft and other critical items, so it was decided to make the lowly canteen from cheap steel and then cover that with enamel to protect the cheap steel from the elements. Well, that didn't work, and the enamel, with its glass-like finish almost, just kind of cracked and fell off. So you almost never ever see one of these that doesn't have rust on it. This one's actually in pretty good condition, having the one spot. I've seen them in, we got a couple up here too. Let's see, there's one there and one there. Now what we don't have with this is the canteen cups. I think they were very rare. I saw one having sold on eBay not too long ago for over $400 just for the cup. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, that's a Shane Manufacturing Company, and I believe that's 1945. Shane Manufacturing Company made the cover. And let's see what we have inside in the way of canteens. Volkrath, prolific maker of canteens, 1944. So that's a nice little setup there. This is what you'd call a late war issue. Probably if this was made in 1945, it did not get into World War II. It was probably sitting in a supply warehouse in Philadelphia waiting out the war. Now, this is the kind of thing you would have seen in the Korean War and even into the Vietnam War in the 60s. The Marines were still using, the old World War II stuff. And I don't doubt that there was some point in the Vietnam War where some guy got issued a 1918 canteen. This has nice brass hooks on it, so it doesn't have any corrosion, and really in pretty good shape. And it has, as do the other ones, some people call these lift the dot snaps. And I think the actual lift the dots snaps are actually marked as such. These don't have any markings, but it goes over that stud. I did want to note that the 1944 canteen has the plastic screw cap compared to the metal ones we saw on the earlier model 1910s. Jumping ahead from the end of World War II to the beginning of the war in Southeast Asia, we have a 1960 cover that at first glance looks like the previous one, this one here from the end of World War II. But notice there's a difference. Here we have those lift the dot snaps Over here we have just plain old snaps. Those kinds of things. If we turn this over, we'll see that it has no hooks, but rather slides. This is the Model M1956, and those slides slip over the belt instead of being hooked on the belt's holes. The sliders went on to be used in pretty much everything attached to military belts and other gear, from canteens to ammo patches. The Marines continued, though, to use the old-style ones with the hooks into the Vietnam War, but eventually everybody adopted these. During the Vietnam War, we started seeing field gear made from nylon, such as this cover, instead of canvas. I think this one was made in 1982. It has a pouch for water purification tablets on the front, and on the back it has the slides, the M56 style slides. The canteen in this is dated 1966. There we go. They produced these beginning in 1962, and for the first time since 1910, we had canteens with caps that would not fit an older canteen. For example, we can take a 1918 canteen and a 1945 model and pretty much swap caps, but the plastic cap on the plastic canteens is just too big. It just slides right on. The threads don't even engage. This style, after the Vietnam War, gained a hole in the lid. There was a hose that ran from that to the gas mask, which had a special watertight fitting, airtight, so that you could hydrate yourself while you were walking about in your gas mask. While the Model 1910 was the military's preferred hydration device for almost 100 years, they did experiment with other types of canteens, including larger ones, and ones designed to keep the water from freezing in extreme cold. The Model M1910 canteen is an iconic piece of military gear. After World War II, Asian companies even started making them for sale to the public for hiking and camping. These are made of much cheaper materials, and every so often I see them at antique malls labeled as World War II. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Krusty Bob over and out.